Dear commanders, academics, researchers, students, and guests, welcome to the second World and Peace Studies Congress themed 21st Century Armed Conflicts, Changing Dynamics and Emerging Lessons. I am Talha Çağman, a graduate student in the War Studies program at National Defense University and a member of the Congress Organizing Committee. I will be hosting the opening session. The agenda of this session is as follows. First, welcome remarks. Second, keynote speech. Third, selected briefings by the members of the Congress Organization Committee. Now I would like to invite Congress President Professor Dr. Oktay Bingöl to provide information about the Congress program.
Dear participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is my great honor and the privilege to welcome you all to the International War and Peace Studies Congress 2025. This is organized under the theme of the 21st Century Armed Conflicts and War, Changing Dynamics and the Emerging Lessons. So we gather here across the borders and disciplines, not only to study the anatomy and the character of the war, but to understand how these experiences can serve as guideposts toward a more peaceful and secure world. The very essence of this Congress lies in transforming knowledge born of conflict into wisdom for the sake of the peace. In an era where hybrid wars blur the boundaries between the soldiers and the civilians, and where technology redefines not only the battlefield, but also the moral dimension of the warfare, our collective responsibility is clear: to learn, to reflect, and to ensure that the lessons of the war becomes the foundation of the peace and security. Now, I would like to provide you with an overview of the 2 days program flow. But first of all, let me share the program, a poster of the Congress. Yes, I think you see the program and the poster on the screen. Our first day has already begun with the opening session, featuring a welcome address and later following me an insightful keynote speech by General Ergin Saygun, whose distinguished career and profound strategic vision will illuminate our Congress theme. His reflections on the transformation in warfare will remind us that while the pace of war may change, its human and ethical consequences remain enduring. Following the keynote speech, you will take 3 briefings on some critical dimensions of 21st century war, namely the lessons learned and actions taken by selected nations. After opening session, the Congress divides into 2 parallel webinars. Webinar A for the English presentation, and the webinar Bravo B is for a Turkish presentation, but each exploring critical dimensions of 21st century warfare. In webinar A, in the first day, titled The War and Politics in the 21st Century, scholars and experts will examine the interesting relationship between the military strategy and the political objectives. The presentation will highlight how conflicts today are as much about narratives and the perceptions as they are about territory or force or technology. And session 2 on the same theme, the webinar A, will address operational lessons from the 21st century wars, from the strategic role of the airborne operations to the tactical complexity of the tunnel warfare and the integration of technology in the close quarter combat in the urban operation. This session bridges theory and the practice. Later, in session 3 on the same day, under the theme command, control, communication, computer, and intelligence, namely the C4I, speakers will focus on the transformative impact of the artificial intelligence, integrated surveillance, and multi-domain operations. These discussions are vital in understanding how technological superiority, and situational awareness shape both deterrence and defense in the warfare. In parallel to the webinar A, webinar B will feature thought-provoking Turkish language sessions. The first, Intelligence and Maneuver in the 21st Century War, examines counterintelligence, unmanned teaming, and accelerating tempo of operations. The second, Naval and Air Operations, focuses on lessons from the Iran-Israel conflict, of course, the Russian-Ukraine war, the Indo-Pakistani engagement, and the modern missile defense architecture. Our second day, 24th October, Friday, begins with the session 4, in the webinar A, Artificial Intelligence and Technology in the 21st Century War, which explore how cyber operations, AI systems, and unmanned technologies are reshaping both conflict and the cooperation at the same time. Session 5, focusing on combat service support and logistics, turns our attention to the backbone of every military campaign, the lessons from Ukraine, Afghanistan, and Nagorno-Karabakh offer invaluable insight into sustainability, energy resilience, and strategic foresight. In the afternoon, session 6, Human Security in the 21st Century Zones, bring the discussion full circle, reminding us that beyond the machinery of war lies the human soul. Presentation on protection of civilians in Gaza, women in war, and humanitarian consideration in asymmetric conflict remind us that the peace is not an abstract concept, but a lived experience, fragile, essential, and deeply human. Simultaneously, in the webinar B continues with session on defense planning and logistics, as well as the human dimension of the war. Topics such as the post-war urban reconstruction, ethical limits of the humanitarian law, and the cultural reflections of warfare in literature and art bridge the analytical or the rational with the emotional. This is important. And that invites us to view conflict not only through the strategic, but also through the humanistic lenses. Over the course of the 2 days, our Congress will host distinguished participants, including the generals, officers, professors, scholars, and the young researchers from several nations. This diversity, I believe, is our strength. It reminds us that while the wars may be fought within the borders, peace must always be built across them. Our discussions will no doubt be rich in military and technological insight. However, our ultimate mission is not to master the art of the war, but at the same time, maybe more importantly, to understand the necessity of peace. As Clausewitz famously observed, war is continuation of politics by other means. But perhaps in the 21st century, it is time for us to redefine this equation, to see peace as the continuation of war studied by wiser means. As we embark on these 2 days of discussion, let us carry forward 3 guiding ideas with us. Learning from conflict. Every war, tragic as it may be, teaches valuable lessons about leadership, strategy, and resilience. And the second, integrating technology and ethics. Tools of war, but our moral compass must remain steadfast. Building a culture of peace. True security comes not only from deterrence alone, but also from understanding and cooperation. Before finishing my remarks, I extend my sincere gratitude to the managers of the Turkish Retired Officer Association for their support, and also the rectorship of the Istanbul Area University, distinguished members of our Scientific Advisory Committee, the organizing committee members, the session moderators, the presenters, and all participants who have made this event possible. Thank you very much. I wish a very fruitful Congress.
We thank Professor Dr. Oktay Bingöl for his remarks. Retired General Ergin Saygun will now deliver his keynote speech. Before inviting him, I would like to share his biography briefly. Mr. Ergin Saygun graduated from the Turkish Military Academy in 1966 as an artillery officer. Between 1967 and 1976, he served in various units within the Turkish Land Forces and as a liaison officer in South Korea. He graduated from the Turkish Military Academy in 1978 and as a staff officer served in various capacities, including battalion and regimental commander, both at home and abroad. Promoted to the rank of Brigadier General in 1993, Mr. Saygun served as head of the Logistics and Movement Department at the Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe and commander of the 14th Mechanized Infantry Brigade. Mr. Saygun was promoted to the rank of Major General in 1997. In this rank, he served as the head of the General Staff Strategy Department, Deputy Commander of the 4th Corps, and the commander of the 1st Mechanized Infantry Division. He was promoted to the rank of Lieutenant General in 2001. In this rank, Mr. Saygun served as the commander of the 3rd Corps and the chairman of the Turkish Military Representative Committee in Brussels. In 2005, he was promoted to the rank of 4-star General and served as Chief of Staff of the Land Forces Command, Deputy Chief of the General Staff, and Commander of the 1st Army of the Turkish Land Forces. Mr. Saygun retired in 2009. Since then, he has prepared strategic analyses on international and national security issues. Dear General, I am confident that all of us are eager to listen to you with curiosity and attention.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, colleagues, and dear participants, it is a pleasure, if not a privilege, to address such a distinguished audience. My thanks goes to the organizers and especially to Professor Oktay Bingöl. The topic we are assigned is most challenging and open to all sorts of discussion. But I promise to make it as less painful as possible. War is as old as humanity itself. Yet while the present has endured through every era, its nature has changed beyond recognition. The weapons, the rules, even the boundaries of conflict are no longer what they once were. Today, we are witnessing not only new wars, but a new logic of war, one defined by data, networks, and algorithms rather than trenches and front lines. There used to be a saying, military history is a cadaver for staff officers. In early centuries, that cadaver, the record of past battles, was vital. It allowed officers to dissect what had happened, to learn how campaigns unfolded, and to prepare for future wars. But today, warfare has transformed so completely that the past no longer provides reliable lessons for the future. The era of trench war and cavalry charges cannot guide us through an age of cyber conflicts, drones, and artificial intelligence. In its earlier forms, war was fought face to face, swords and shields. Victory depended on courage, proximity, and terrain. But the Industrial Revolution altered everything. Factories enabled mass armies and mechanized destruction. World War I introduced chemical weapons, machine guns, and tanks. World War II brought radar, aircraft, and the nuclear bomb. Korea saw the first jet engines, planes. Vietnam became the era of helicopter. The Gulf War demonstrated precision-guided munitions and satellite targeting. Today, we are witnessing the age of unmanned systems and algorithmic warfare. For centuries, wars followed templates, ratios of attack to defense, fixed front lines, clear hierarchies. That predictability has vanished. Modern conflicts are fluid, decentralized, and multi-domain. In Ukraine, we saw convoys operating under rigid centralized command suffer heavy losses against agile defenders with decentralized control. The lesson is clear. An army built on centralized command and control cannot sustain initiative. Adaptability now outweighs mass. Flexibility outperforms bureaucracy. Perhaps no change is more visible than the rise of unmanned systems in the air, at sea, and on land. Originally tools for reconnaissance, they now carry decisive and destructive firepower. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, open source intelligence indicates that Ukraine, although it has no navy, has damaged or destroyed roughly 1/3 of the Russian Black Sea fleet, including the flagship Moscow. Drones and unmanned surface vehicles have been achieved, what once required entire fleet. These systems are small, inexpensive, and deadly. A 30,000 Reaper can be destroyed by 20,000 drones locally built. Similar tactics are seen in Yemen, where Houthi forces have struck naval and commercial targets, prompting the multinational Prosperity Guardian mission in the Red Sea. Unmanned platforms, affordability, and local manufacturability have democratized warfare, empowering even militias and terrorist organizations. Their limitations, range, payload, vulnerability to weather, are offset by rapid advances in autonomy and sworn coordination. The result is a new era of mass precision with no proportionality. The modern battlefield now extends into the rigid digital realm. Although nothing new, cyber operations can cripple a nation's economy without a single shot fired. In 2021, colonial pipeline attack in the United States halted nearly half of the East Coast's fuel supply, providing that code can be as destructive as ordnance. Similarly, GPS spoofing and undersea cable sabotage in the Middle East and Baltic regions have disrupted navigation and communication networks. Systems such as US Joint All-Domain Command and Control now seek to integrate land, air, sea, cyber, and space data into a unified decision network. Artificial intelligence analyzes these inputs in real time, offering commanders multiple courses of action. No single force warfighting any longer. But with that speed comes a dilemma. As algorithms gain power, human oversight must not be lost. Proxy wars, direct confrontation among major powers has become rare. Instead, influence is projected through proxy wars, smaller states or non-state actors fighting on behalf of the global powers. Ukraine, Taiwan, Syria, Yemen each illustrate this pattern. Proxy warfare minimizes political risk for sponsors, but prolongs conflicts and blurs accountability. Even multinational banners, such as some operations claim to be under NATO, may represent the agendas of a few individual nations. Let's not forget space. Outer space, once the domain of exploration, is now extension of the battlefield. According to 2024 data from SIPRI and OECD, global space defense spending exceeded $70 billion, led by the United States with $53 billion, China $9 billion, and Russia $2 billion. Nations are deploying small satellite constellations for surveillance and communication while developing anti-satellite weapons capable of disabling or deorbiting rival satellites. The next major conflict may begin not in the skies, but beyond them. Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming command and control. AI change enhances logistics, targeting, and threat analysis, compressing the decision cycle from minutes to seconds. Yet this very advantage introduces grave ethical and legal concerns. For instance, who authorizes an autonomous strike? Who's accountable for error or collateral damage? Delegating lethal decisions to algorithms challenges the principles of command and control, responsibility, and international humanitarian law. As one strategist observed, we may soon win wars faster than we can justify them. Preserving human judgment is essential to maintaining moral legitimacy in warfare. Of course, we shouldn't forget economic warfare and sanctions. This has become the most pervasive form of conflict. Sanctions, embargoes, trade restrictions now serve as primary tools of coercion. According to 2024 IMF data, more than 12,000 active sanctions were in force worldwide, a record number. But of course, sanctions must be declared by the United Nations. At present, out of that 12,000, only 14 sanctions fit this category. However, sanctions often yield unintended effects. Turkey, for instance, repeatedly subjected to arms embargoes, all by NATO allies, has responded by developing a robust domestic defense industry, producing its own drones, tanks, and missile systems. Similarly, China, despite US export restrictions, now holds over 55% of global patents in key emerging technologies, including nanotech and hypersonics. As one Turkish leader said, a bad neighbor makes one a homeowner, a bad ally makes one a manufacturer. Sanctions are intended to weaken, often end up catalyzing self-reliance and innovation. What will happen in the future? Let's say a few words about that. The next generation of warfare will be defined by human-machine cooperation and data-driven strategy. Future soldiers may command fleets of autonomous systems rather than lead battalions in person. Strategic advantage will depend on integration, combining technology, ethics, and adaptability. The main challenge lies not in building smarter machines, but in cultivating wiser humans. People who can balance speed with judgment and automation with accountability. Education, not armament, will determine who prevails in the wars of the future. Ladies and gentlemen, war today is no longer confined to the battlefield. It unfolds across economies, data networks, and the perception of societies. Victory will belong not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. Those who can combine knowledge with integrity and power with restraint. As we enter an era of intelligent warfare, our duty is to ensure that intelligence remains guided by conscience. Technology should serve humanity, not define it. If we forget that, the machines will not be needed to defeat us, we will defeat ourselves. This much, I think, is enough before I challenge your patience. I thank you once again for your kind attention. May understanding, not conflict, be the enduring legacy of our time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your speech, General. In this part of the sessions, 3 briefings will be presented by the Congress Organization Committee committee members to provide the basis for subsequent discussions. Professor Oktay Bingöl will present the first brief.
Good morning again. So in this part, I will provide you with a briefing on some critical lessons taken from the 21st century war, but namely, particularly from the Russian-Ukraine war and also the Israel operation or the invasion of the Gaza. I will focus on these two operations or the conflict. But first of all, I will share my briefing presentation, PowerPoint presentation with you. I think you see it. Okay. Put it here, and also you can see bigger one. Yes. Okay. You see, I think a bigger one, larger one. Yes, this is my briefing, primary lessons from the 21st century. As you know, there are many lessons, but these are the primary areas you will see in the following slide. And also the more importantly, actions of the selected countries. I benefited from the several references that you see, some of them on the slide. We will also share these the sources or references with you, and interested person, researchers can read all the documents. These are the open sources. You will see some of them here. Also, you will see it here. References are specifically in the United States, of course, and also in the UK research centers, and Ukraine research centers, and Russia, China, and Poland, especially in the Poland. As you know, the Poland very close to the Russian-Ukraine conflict, and so they are very interested in observing and capturing some lessons, for their doctrines, for their armed forces reconstruction. You'll see the many again here. These are some of the references. But before start, I would like to make a definition of the lessons learned. You will see several definitions, several versions of the definitions in literature in the open sources, but this is the military lessons learned, military definition, and also my preference. I prefer this definition. I think it covers all aspects of the lesson learned process. That is the validated knowledge and experience derived from the operations or exercises or the conflict and war. By operations, I am saying this, or exercises that lead to improve effectiveness and efficiency at the same time when institutionalized in doctrine, training, or policy. If they are not institutionalized in the doctrine, training, or the policy, they are not the lessons learned. Maybe they are lessons identified or captured or observed, but not the lessons learned. You see the cycle. There is a cycle for this, of course. Capture or the observation, first of all, from the collection from the after-action reports, operational reports, or experiments. And then the analysis, the phase of that observed or the captured lessons. And then validation or decide. There are lessons learned board in some countries, so they validate it and they decide that is the lesson learned. And of course, they assign the actions and they give the deadlines to implement it. And then the implementation or dissemination phase starts, and then the last phase, maybe the monitor or close of the to see that the actual behavior change occurred or not. It becomes, I can say this as a bottom line, it becomes learned on the collective action has been successfully applied. Senior level ownership is required to ensure that the lessons identified become lessons learned, demonstrably embedded in the practice. So that is the system. That is lessons learned system. We see this system, very well developed system in the United States, in the UK, in most of the Western countries, in Russia, in China, in Israel. We see this. In the joint forces, in the services, the land forces, air forces, and on operational level, tactical level, and the strategic level. So, based on this, I will talk about this area, 7 primary areas. You see on the slide, drones and counter-drones, electronic warfare and electromagnetic spectrum operation, integrated air and missile defense, munitions or industry, namely the logistics, command and control or the command post survivability, urban operation, information operation or the influence operation or the perception management. My methodology is something like this. I put for each area 2 slides. In the first slide, you will see the topic, main area, and then I will try to explain what changed in this area. What was the case study? A typical case study. There might be several cases for this. But what was the typical one? Why it matters also. I will try to explain it. And then you will see a table, something like this, the action by state. I selected these 5 countries because there are information. We can find the data. We can find the information on the lessons learned in these countries. That is the reason I selected them. Yeah, that is the first area, drones and counter-drones, or counter-unmanned aerial systems. So we know that at the beginning of the Russian-Ukraine war, what was important, what was the surprising? Drones. But later, 1 year later or 2 years later, and the counter-drone system developed. In the Russia, in the Ukraine, in the Western countries, in the Israel, in Iran, and somewhere else. Modern battlefields are saturated with the unmanned systems, ranging from the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance drones to loitering munitions and maritime USP. So there is a typical case study that saturation. interdiction by the person B in the Ukraine, the Pobrosk axis. That was the Russian summer 2025 attack, offensive. So Russian FPV swarms repeatedly struck the vehicles along one of the main supply routes near the Pobrosk in the Ukraine, forcing the resupply by foot at night and stretching the Ukraine ground lines of communication. Analysts judged many injuries, casualties were FPV caused, highlighting the need for both kinetic counter-drones and the non-EV defenses when jamming in saturated or depleted. That is important because now the drones now achieve interdiction effect, one reserved for aircraft, forcing adaptation in logistics, dispersion, and survival on both sides in Ukraine. So these are the actions by the state, United States, DoD, move the layered counter-drones and mass autonomous systems across the force. That is the systems of the United States and initiative replicator. With the replicator, United States the aim to increase the production of the system, mass production, especially benefiting from the commercial sector. That was a real initiative, provoking actually or encouraging the commercial sector to produce, to manufacture the thousands of the drones in a week. And in the United Kingdom, United Kingdom MOD is building the layered system across the echelon, strategic, operative, and tactical levels. But they put that it is important to integrate, not to buy stovepipe ready gadgets or the tools. So Ukraine created a new unmanned system forces and national drone program to scale the FPV and the other drones. Russia also announced a dedicated drone branch to institutionalize the battlefield USA, the lesson. And also China, the China observed what changed, and also Chinese army analysts pushed to settle tier anti-jamming drones and swarm them after watching the Ukraine. So these are the actions by the state. And second big area is the electronic warfare and electromagnetic spectrum operation. What changed? Conflict revealed that the EMS is a high contest zone anymore. The M spectrum is a primary battle space. Units planned for constant jamming, supporting strict signature discipline, and then deception. So again, from the Ukraine, there is a case study for this. That was the Ukraine initiative. Pokrova Superwing Shield. That was an initiative, again, a network. Ukraine fielded a nationwide superwing network, Pokrova, to mislead the Iranian type, especially the Iranian type waves. That was the one-way attack waves, and some PGMs, precision guided munitions, reportedly causing the large fraction to miss or wander. Even partial success imposes massive cost asymmetry on the attacker and reduces the interceptor expenditure. Save the interceptor because that is the more costly. Why it matters? Control of AMS determines whether drones, precision weapons, and C2 work at all, forcing the army to diversify communication and accept degraded modes. Action by the state, you see, United States Army, training and doctrine now assumes a highly contested end, emphasizing the dispersion and the signature control, UK also emphasizes the whole force electronic warfare integration. Ukraine operates with a whole AMS-dual mindset. Russia systematically secured the electronic warfare to blunt the Ukrainian sensors, drones, sustaining the teacher-wide advantage. China also, by creating its information support force, created an information support force, is reinforcing the digital and AMS battle space as a primary domain in the doctrine and in the practice. So third area is the integrated air and missile defense, IAMD, especially what changed the salvo warfare. We witnessed this in the Iranian, the Israel or the United States, the attack to the Iran. We witnessed that there are the salvos of the drones or the missiles or all the weapon systems. So salvo warfare mixes the ballistic cruise missiles with hundreds of the cheap drones, overwhelming the point defenses, air defenses, of course, point defenses, unless the centers, shooters, and electronic warfare are fused across the services and the allies. That is also the case study, as I mentioned, Iran's April 13 and 14, 2024 massive strike on the Israel. And in that time, United States tried to defend the Israel air area, but the U.S. CENTCOM report destroying the more than 80 one-way attack waves and multiple ballistic missiles in coalition IAMD operations proves that the integrated sensing, shared C2, and layered effectors can defeat the very large salvos. Those lessons are informing the Allied doctrine and the NATO, United States, and the other countries' doctrine and the exercise. You see here, the action by the state, as I mentioned, United States DoD doubled down on coalition IMD and kill change for large salvo. United Kingdom Army landing the land, ground barrier defense, and the wider IAMD strategy focused on the command, control, and integration. Ukraine built an IAMD the integrated the Patriot, NASAM, air defense system, and doctrine for defending the cities and the port system. Russia, doctrinal writing elevates the counter-strike and the air defense integration after heavy attrition. And also the China, observing all these, what is happening in the area, China Military Policy Review 2024 highlights the Chinese Army dense IADC and growing counter-salvo emphasis. And another area is the munitions and industry. We can say the logistics in general. Fast change, high tempo, attritional combat demands the industrial scale resupply. The United States has invested billions of dollars, of course, in 155 millimeter lines and factories to achieve the six-figure monthly output. That was the requirement. That was the need at the one phase of the Russian-Ukraine war. Europe is scrambling to increase its shell production to multi-million-dollar level. I am sure that you are aware of the Europe the challenge to increase it or to develop its system, improve its capacity in the defense. European Union also allocated, I think, more than 100 billion euro for a project, safe project. That is the main aim for this, to increase its defense capacity. So that is the case from the United States. U.S. artillery production surge for the 2024 and 2026. The Army opened new projectile loading lines and greenlit a modern factory in the the new official project 100,000 per month, marking 2026, not 2025, showing how hard scaling strategy is and why planning assumption must reflect the industry lead times. You may decide as an army, as a military, to procure the more ammunition, but you couldn't be able to find anywhere. That is the reason. The all planning assumption must reflect the industry lead time. So you see here the action by the state, United States. I talked about this one. UK invested heavily in the continuous munition supply and new facilities. Ukraine domestic output expanded sharply with the partner, and also the Russian strategy embraces attritional, industry-centric warfighting, mass attacks, and the sustainment. Industry-centric warfighting, you see that in the Russian-Ukraine war, and Russia always trying to hit the Ukraine production facilities. China is accelerating the missile and rocket production to sustain the long-term high tempo combat. And another area is the C2, command post survivability. You may understand, all of us understand easily for this command post survivability, because the big static headquarters are artillery drone magnets. If your headquarters or the command post are static, you will be strapped, you will be hit. High precision targeting demands resilient, agile command post configuration. So that is the case study. Ukraine, the command post survivability, the procedures, technical procedures, that was the 2024, that was disseminated. Ukraine manual details the camouflage cover and discipline, route tempo of displays and decoys to defeat the Russian ISR fires. Particular measures many NATO CPs still lack at the scale. So you see here, actions by the state, United States, disseminates CP survivability procedures from Ukraine. The US benefit from Ukraine lessons, and United Kingdom also post-Ukraine reforms emphasize resilient, distributed C2 and faster acquisition to build it. And I talk about Ukraine and Russia also tactics evolved to protect the C2 with dispersion, camouflage, and decoys under the constant ISR. That is similar in the China. And the urban operations, especially in the Ukraine and also but more important in the Gaza, warfare in the built-up area presents unique challenges. Civilian presence, infrastructure complexity, subterranean spaces, especially tunnels or something like this, heavy C2 friction because of the tall buildings, and the heavy ISR saturation. And again, that was the case. Study IDF, Israel Defense Forces in Gaza. Report summarized, there was a report of the IDF. A report summarized combined armed in high-rise tunnel terrain and the trade-off among the tempo, threat reshaping. That is the important. The fire from your own forces, and the collateral mitigation. So, action by the state, United States refines the doctrine about tunnels, high civilian density, and the decentralized tempo. That is important because in the urban area you cannot put a centralized tempo for all units. And the United Kingdom, UK leans into lessons from Gaza and Ukraine to inform the subterranean and dense urban fighting. Of course, Ukraine learned a lot from the Bakhmut or anywhere else. And Russia had adjusted the assault formation and fire support for urban attrition. And China studies transparent urban battlefields, countering drone saturation and ensuring the command clarity. And last area is the information operation influence or the perception management. Information has become as lethal as a missile. Ukraine's Stratcom during the full-scale war, that was the case study, Center for Strategic Communications, Stratcom, and the Information Security. This is a unit in the department, specific department in the Ukraine army, coordinate messaging, counter disinformation, and public guidance, illustrating how whole of government IO supports operational objective and societal resilience in protracted conflict. So you see the action by the state. The US builds the information advantage into training and operation. UK integrates this across the multi-domain integration construct, and Ukraine's government actively counters disinformation via the centralized communication center. Russian doctrine now synchronizes IO with the fires, cyber, and attrition, and also the Chinese information support force plays the information domain as a strategic axis of the joint operation. So this is the end of my briefing. Thank you very much for your attention. As I mentioned, we will disseminate, publish these briefings and the other briefings to all participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bingöl. Now I invite Associate Professor Ali Bilgin Varlık to present the second briefing.
Good morning. Before starting, I would like to extend my deepest respects to all distinguished participants. I will share my briefing. Is it visible?
Yes.
Okay. My topic is a threat assessment concerning militarization and weaponization of space. I will cover 9 subtopics, but mainly concentrate on the last 2, contemporary dynamics of space threats and assessments. The concept of militarization and weaponization of space constitute a subfield of broader concept of space security and safety. The space security and safety framework addresses threats in 3 main areas: threats from space to Earth, threats to ecological system of space, threats to space system facilities and operations. Threats to these areas often overlap. In other words, a single threat may simultaneously affect multiple domains. Indeed, the militarization and weaponization of space are no longer exception and concern more than one area at a time. To properly conceptualize the concept of space, militarization, and weaponization, 2 prerequisites are to be considered. First pertains to what is encompassed by the concept of threat, and the second concern the place of these threats within the broader threat taxonomy. Turning to threat taxonomy, the chart on the screen depicts types of threats and their interactions with the main areas of threat together with the effects of these threats. As you would see, the weaponization and militarization of space, considered as a subfield of threats to space facilities and activities with the high degree of effects. Militarization of space constitutes mainly use of outer space, including non-weapon activities like military navigation systems and organizational procedures and formations, while weaponization of space is an area of placement, deployment, or testing weapons in space. Types of counter-space technologies covers 5 technologies. I will not go into detail. Types of counter-space weapons are composed of 4 areas: kinetic weapons, non-kinetic weapons, electronic weapons, and cyber operations. Threat segments of space security is composed by 3 segments: ground segment threats, communication link segment threats, and space segment threats. Contemporary dynamics of space threats are twofold: militarization of space and weaponization of space. Turning to the militarization of space. This slide shows organizational space command and structure of 10 countries. US is the leading state in this area, followed by Russia and China concerning the early establishment and engagement in the military space activities. You would see the rest of the other countries and their establishments. Militarization of outer space extends beyond global navigation satellite systems. Others are reconnaissance and surveillance satellites, SATCOM, early observation and remote sensing satellites, and navigation and posting systems. The slide on the screen depicts the number of military and military purpose satellites by states. As you would see, US has an overwhelming position in number of satellites, followed by China and Russia. As you would see, the total is 612. Turning to contemporary dynamics of space threat weaponization. Attempts on deployment of kinetic energy weapons in space has been unsuccessful up to now. US Strategic Defense Initiative and Soviet Union development of Peleus has not been completed. Today, there are no confirmed operational weapons deployed in outer space. On the other hand, all states, including non-space capacity ones, are able to direct kinetic assaults to terrestrial infrastructure. Concerning with kinetic energy weapons, US, China, Russia, and most probably France has direct ascent capability. China has possible, Russia has probable, and US has more probable orbit ascent capacity. North Korea's only space launch attempt in 2024 ended in failure, though this demonstrates increasing North Korean proficiency with space. Concerning with the dual-use anti-satellite capabilities, one of the most notable examples was China's 11 January 2007 direct assault test, in which a ballistic missile destroyed the Fenyun-1C weather satellite. Similarly, the United States carried out an operation in 2008 to destroy the malfunctioning USA 193 reconnaissance satellite. India's mission Shakti in 2019 added another dimension to the global counter-space landscape by intercepting one of its own satellites in low Earth orbit. Israel effectively maintains a latent anti-satellite capability, particularly when paired with the satellite detection and tracking knowledge. This past year, 2024, also saw the growth of commercial and military dual-use technologies that could be modified to serve a counter-space purpose. Companies working in space servicing and debris removal reach important milestones. These asset demonstrations underscore that contemporary space weaponization remains largely grounded in the development of dual-use technologies, ground-based systems, and counter-space capabilities designed to disable or destroy satellites, rather than the permanent stationing of offensive weapons in orbit. Concerning non-kinetic soft kill weapons, particularly directed energy weapons, last year there was no public indications that any nation tested or used counter-space weapons such as laser, dazzler, or direct energy weapons. However, US, China, and Russia have enough capacity to produce direct energy weapons. Israel continues to develop and refine direct energy weapons, such as Iron Beam, of use in missile defense. When it comes to the nuclear threat, all 9 nuclear weapons producers pose potential nuclear threat to space. Although it's not confirmed, there are some concerns that Russia is developing a new space-based anti-satellite nuclear weapon. The strategic attraction of a nuclear weapon is that it has the potential to destroy many satellites at once. Concerning electronic and cyber attacks, this past year saw a continuation and growth of the same trend. Last year, GPS jamming and spoofing were becoming ubiquitous across parts of the world, particularly in areas of active military conflict. Assessment. Militarization of space is considered at a level of imminent danger. Weaponization of space presents varying degrees of threat. Deployment of kinetic energy weapons in orbit remains a potential concern. Weaponization of space remains largely confined to dual-use technologies, counter-space capabilities, and ground-based systems designed to interfere with or disable satellites, rather than stationing of offensive weapons in orbit. Direct ascent anti-satellite capabilities currently possessed by the United States, China, Russia, and likely France. Apart from that, North Korea has potential proficiency with space missile and rocket technologies. States without advanced space capabilities retain the ability to endanger terrestrial infrastructure. And finally, electronic attacks are assessed as falling within the explicit threat category. That concludes my briefing, unless there is any question.
Thank you very much, Professor Varlık. For the third briefing, I would like to invite Dr. Hasan Yılmaz.
Greetings to everyone attending the Congress. I am retired Colonel Hasan Yılmaz. The following 10 minutes or so, I will do a generic rehearsal of simple lessons learned process. The rehearsal includes some of key operational lessons from the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. Pretty much all of those points have been covered already by Professor Bingöl and will be covered in the sessions follow, probably. The aim is not to be correct or precise about them, but rather to unlock the idea of converting lessons into actionable tasks through the .mlpfi lens. This lens will then shed light on how to improve existing or generate needed capabilities. It is a generic study to bring experience into institutional learning. So it will provide a glimpse of lessons learned process. What .mlpfi stands is written on the slide. The concept stems from US Joint Capabilities Development System and similarly applied in NATO system as well. Why it matters? Because the concept is pretty much linked to the lessons learned process. Lessons identified needs to be converted into capability through actionable tasks under these domains. This Congress, as its main focus, has been keeping a repository of lessons identified in modern and recent conflicts since last year. For the purpose of clarity and simplicity, the template used includes incident observation, analysis discussion, and suggestion actions pillars in it as a way to process information. The lessons presented in this study, in this presentation, were already captured in these 3 reports shown on the slide. These reports talk about implications for future capabilities and provide recommendations. This study, in contrast, will try to bring a comparative synthesis of these lessons within the .mlpfi framework. Though this study, this presentation, drew 9 comparative lessons, due to time constraint, maybe I will present only 4, 5, maybe 6. Okay, the first lesson theme that this study caught from these references is the command and control under stressed environments. Both Ukrainian and Gazan campaigns exposed how dependence on continuous connectivity erodes initiative. In Ukraine, commanders overcame this difficulty by preserving tempo through intent-based leadership, even when their networks fell silent. However, in Gaza, once IDF centralized control lost contact, whole formations hesitated. The lesson identified here is that command intent must outlast connectivity. This means command structures must be built to survive isolation and electronic suppression. Of course, now this analysis leads to consideration about actionable tasks under different domains. So, first of all, codification or reaffirmation of the mission command concept needs to be done in doctrine, so as to prepare units for long blackout periods. Accordingly, exercises and training needs to simulate EW denial and degraded C2 environment. Lastly, emphasis on judgment under uncertainty and on decentralized initiative needs to be given in leadership programs. Now I can hear many of you saying this is mission command intent, nothing new. Yes, but it is now in different context, and this lesson is repeating itself. Now the second lesson, logistics under fire. In Ukraine, it is observed that logistic operations moved under constant enemy surveillance and precision strikes. Strict light, sound, and emission discipline were applied, and convoys...
Sir, excuse me, we are still at slide number 2.
I am changing the slides, needs to be seen on the screen.
Yes, yes, I see the slide 3 now. Slide 2, slide 3. It's changing. Yeah, good.
Okay.
But I think it is not changing
It's my fault then.
In the screen. Okay. Continue.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. I extremely apologize. On my screen, it's still number 2. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. It is observed that logistic operations under constant enemy surveillance and precision strikes in Ukraine. Strict light, sound, and emission discipline were applied, and convoys traveled with handheld GPS devices at night along unlit secondary roads and in dispersed small pockets. This way, they managed to evade UAV observation. Additionally, hidden depots were camouflaged in civilian or abandoned industrial sites. What emerged from this cautionary approach was a logistic system that behaved like maneuver troops, fast, stealthy, and constantly relocating to survive. In Gaza, the challenge took another form. It is observed that IDF combat engineers had to merge humanitarian and military supply lines after infrastructure collapse. 8 convoys, engineering vehicles, and armored columns shared the same corridors through densely populated terrain, with civilian movement and fire missions competing for the same space. As a result, coordination, deconfliction, and legitimacy emerged as critical as fuel and water. The lesson identified here is that sustainment has become combat discipline rather than a area function. Thus, accordingly, in doctrine, logistics must be codified as part of maneuver, not a supporting service. Organizationally, joint coordination cells should fuse military transport with civilian distribution expertise. Training must include deception, redundancy, and resupply under direct threat. Materially, fleets must be hardened, modular, and quickly repairable. So in summary, analysis speaks as such. When logistics moves, the campaign breathes. The third lesson, situational awareness and information flow. This is a modern-day problem and its reflection to modern warfare. In Ukraine, flows of sensor data overwhelm commanders. In Gaza, every image broadcasted worldwide within minutes shaped legitimacy of operations. Across both conflicts, forces identified that awareness without discipline creates confusion. Thus, the lesson identified is that managing information discipline equals combat power, and it is important as firepower. Thus, doctrinally, command guidance must state what to collect, what to share, what to silence, and in order to strengthen the judgment of troops, training should follow the suit by exposing units to information overloads and misinformation. As for the material domain, apart from sensors, investment should also bend on secure fusion and filtering tools. Moreover, for allies to support better and share the same picture, ISR procedures among allies should be harmonized to curb possible conflicts. So the takeaway in this lesson could be victory in the digital battle space belongs to those who know when not to speak. Lesson 4, urban complexity and subterranean threats. Both theaters identified that modern cities are vertical battlefields where tactics, politics, and ethics collide. Ukrainian defenders fought above and below ground, whereas in Gaza, subterranean networks neutralize conventional superiority. The lesson identified here is that urban warfare is multi-level and morally constrained. Thus, armies must codify subterranean operations and civilian interaction as core missions in their doctrine. As such, training modules should be improved to cover this scenario, and training centers should provide environments for the tunnel systems and constrained visibility to build resilience. Materially, forces need specialized mapping and detection tools suited for complexity. Also, leadership education must prepare commanders for proportional judgment amid civilian presence. So the takeaway here is, in the city, discipline is strategy. Lesson 5, technology saturation and friction. Both conflicts identified the paradox of advanced warfare. The more digital the system, the easier it breaks. Already in the command and control under pressure heading, this issue covered partially. Here, the purpose is to bring attention to the electronic and digital tools other than command and control. Targeting and remote controlling were heavily affected in these conflicts. Ukraine's drones went blind under electronic warfare. In Gaza, IDF precision tools failed amid chaos. The lesson identified here is that technology expands reach but magnifies fragility. Thus, not sophistication, but resilience ensures endurance. Therefore, redundancy, analog alternatives must be codified in doctrine as operational imperatives. Organizationally, dedicated resilience cells should monitor, repair, and replace degraded capabilities. Accordingly, training should simulate electronic isolation scenario. Materially, equipment procurement should favor sustainability over novelty. So the main takeaway here is victory will belong not to the most advanced, but to the most recoverable. Lesson 6, human factors and adaptation. Both campaigns identified agility as the currency of survival. Ukrainian surgeons rewrote doctrine in the field. The IDF adjusted tactics within a week. The lesson identified here is that the armed forces must learn faster than they fight. The implications there are implications for some actions, and there are actions required for institutional flexibility. Doctrinally, feedback and update cycles must become continuous rather than periodic. Organizationally, small innovation teams should capture and test battlefield improvisations rapidly. Training must transform after actions reviews from paperwork into applied change. Personnel policy should promote creative initiative over compliance. So the main takeaway here is, in modern war, speed of learning outmatches size of force. Lesson 7, Industrial Endurance, which is more about national policies. The wars identified endurance as a dual front. Factories sustain firepower, societies sustain legitimacy. Ukraine's resistance was powered by allies and industry. Gaza's duration was constrained by global opinion. The lesson identified is that victory depends on both supply and permission. The implications of these lessons demand synchronization of production, politics, and perception. Doctrinally, endurance metrics must be built into campaign plans. Organizationally, defense industry and alliance coordination must be continuous, not crisis-driven. Training should include long-duration operations stressing logistical and mental endurance. Materially, national industries must be prepared for wartime surge. So motto from this analysis is, a military that plans only for the first month will never see the last. Lesson 8 is information and legitimacy. While Ukraine's visible restraint strengthened alliances, Gaza's humanitarian crisis weakened legitimacy of IDF. These experiences identified that modern wars are fought as much in public conscience as in terrain. The lesson identified here is that perception control equals power projection. Doctrinally, legitimacy must become a planned objective, merging operations and humanitarian conduct. Training should cultivate information discipline and civilian respect as tactical habits. Interoperability requires shared communication strategies with allies and NGOs. Thus, main takeaway here could be, reputation is now part of the order of battle. Lesson 9, Institutional Integration and Resilience. Both Ukraine and Gaza conflicts identified that modern warfare cannot be won by isolated excellence. In Ukraine, success depended on coordination between fires, logistics, and governance, in which mayors kept crises running while generals kept fronts stable. In Gaza, fragmentation between political and military systems and dependency on dual-use infrastructure constrained every maneuver. The lesson identified here is that institutional integration between command, civil structures, and industry determines endurance more than technology itself. The implication of this lesson demand whole of a nation adaptation rather than a narrow military reform. Doctrinally, integration must be written into campaign design as an operational condition, not an afterthought. Organizationally, standing joint coordination centers should merge military planning with civil logistics and governance. Training must include prolonged multi-sector exercises where military, industrial, and humanitarian actors cooperate under pressure. Material resilience depends on distributed infrastructure, hardening, and rapid repair mechanisms. Leadership education must emphasize initiative within coordination, commanders who can both decide and synchronize. Finally, interoperability must harmonize standards across agencies, allies, to prevent fragmentation in crisis. Thus, an outline of this analysis is no army fights alone anymore, and endurance is institutional. To recap the whole study in terms of content, I here provide a synthesis of the traits in both conflicts and list of generic actions. The wars of Ukraine and Gaza identified that modern warfare is both technical and moral, adaptive yet constrained. Lesson identified is that resilience without restraint leads to ruin, and restraint without adaptation leads to defeat. The implication of this general lesson encompasses all .MLPFI domains, requiring a holistic transformation of thought and structure. Doctrine must evolve continuously. Organizations must innovate without pause. Training has to merge real-world complexity with ethical clarity. Material must support flexibility, not dependency. Leadership should cultivate wisdom alongside courage. Interoperability must ensure allies learn together, not apart. The future will favor those who learn while fighting and fight without losing their humanity. And this concludes my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yılmaz. Ladies and gentlemen, with these three briefings, the opening session is completed. Congress will continue with the first sessions of Webinar A and Webinar B at 12 a.m. Thank you very much for your participation and attention. Looking forward to meet you again in the webinars.
Evet, Talha, bu güzel sunucunun için ben teşekkür ediyorum sana.
Sağ olun.
Teşekkür ederim tekrar. Evet, bütün katılımcılara da teşekkür ediyorum. Ben bu arada